All right, this video is the beginning of chapter 7, and we are going to review 7.1, which is on understanding tenths and place value. So this is going to review how to change a fraction to the decimal, improper to a decimal, mixed number to a decimal, and decimals on a number line. Hopefully after this you will have a better understanding of tenths and how we go about writing using what we know about place value. So first of all, as a reminder, when we have place value, I know that the numbers, the decimal point, anything this side of the decimal point are whole numbers, and anything this side of the decimal point would be the actual decimal or parts of a whole, like a fraction. And I know that this is the ones place, this is the tens, this is the hundreds, and this is the thousands. And I know that in this side, over by the decimal side, this is the tenths place, and this is the hundredths place. And that our place value aligns. So we have tens and tenths, hundreds and hundreds, and then it would go thousands and thousands. And that on either side of the decimal, our place value stays the exact same, except that on this side we have whole numbers, and on this side we have parts of a whole. So what we are going to practice today is specifically tenths. All right, so let's see. First up, I'm going to skip that. As a review, what we've been talking about is, and when we're talking about tenths, the word tells me what it's broken into. Tenths are always broken into tens. So when we learned about fractions, they could be broken into anything. A fraction, we could cut the pizza into ninths, we could cut it into thousands, we can cut it into 33rds. That's not the case with decimals. Decimals can only be, at this point, cut into tenths or hundreds or thousands, okay? So we are specifically working with tenths. Here is one way to show a tenth, which is just 1 out of 10 colored in. Another way is 1 bar out of 10 colored in. Or we're going to talk about number lines, and it is on the first hop out of 10 hops, okay? So a tenth is written as, chapter 6 would be fractions, or now we can write it as 1/10. And the reason that this says 1/10 is because there is a 1 in the 10th place. If I had 2.5 as a fraction, I would write that as a decimal as 2. The decimal point means and I would make this, I'm going to say, actually change this to be, 2 and 1/10. 2 and 1/10 or 2 and 1/10. The 2 is in the ones place. I say the word and it's 1/10 because it's in the 10th place, okay? So we're going to practice. Now an example would be 2/10. Again, 2/10 looks like this for fractions. And for decimals, it sounds exactly the same, but I write it like this because I have 2 in the 10th place. So again, I have 2 out of 10, 2 out of 10, or the second hop out of 10. Tenths are always cut into 10. Okay, so right now I'm going to practice reading and writing these as decimals. So I have 5/10, and I write that as 0 and 5/10. I have 6/10, which is 0 and 6/10. This one says 3/10, so I have 3 in the 10th place. And this one says 8/10, so I have 8 in the 10th place. We don't read it 0.5, 0.6. That's not the correct way to read it. We read it as what we know about place value. So 5/10, 6/10, 3/10. Okay, or we can see it visually. And again, if I know that I'm working with decimals, you don't have to count how many there are because I automatically know that there's going to be 10 because I'm working with decimals. On fractions, I would have to count because it might be out of 8s, it might be out of 100 or a 20 over 25th. We don't know, but I can automatically assume that this is out of 10. Again, they want to know the shaded parts as a decimal. So I see 1, 2, 3, 4 tenths that are shaded, and I would write that as 4/10. I really don't even have to count the unshaded because I know that if I'm working out of 10 and 4 of them are shaded, then 6 have to be unshaded because 6 plus 4 is 10. So I know 6 out of 10 are unshaded. 6/10, 6/10. Over here I have 2 out of 10 are shaded, which is 2/10, so I would write it as 2/10. And if 2 are shaded, I know that 8 must be unshaded because 8 plus 2 is 10. So the unshaded is 8/10. And again, I can check because if I add the shaded and the unshaded, then the whole thing will be covered. So 6 plus 4 is 10/10. If I have 10 out of 10 and I color in 10 out of 10, then I know the whole thing is colored. Same here. If I have 2 colored and then I add the 8 colored, then I have 10 out of 10 colored, which is 1 whole, which means I have 1 whole thing colored. All right, let's try Now a number line, again, same thing as what we did with fractions, except that we're writing it out of, we're writing it in decimal form. So I have 0 and I have 1 whole. Because I'm working with tenths, I know that there are 10 hops. So this would be 1/10 or 1/10. This would be 2/10 or 2/10. This one would be 3/10. Then I have 4/10, and then I have 5/10, which I know is halfway. 6/10, 7/10, 8/10, 9/10, and then 10/10 equals 1 whole thing. Okay, when I think of place value, if I have my place value and I have the number, let's see, I have my ones and my tens and my hundreds, I can't write 10 ones in the ones place. If I have 10 ones, I regroup that to be 110. If I have 10 tens, I can't have 10 in the tens place. That's too many. I would regroup it and have 100. The same thing happens for decimals. If I have my place value chart and I have my decimal place and my tenths place and my ones, and I have 4 point, and I want to say like I have 4 point and I have 10 tenths. If I have 10 in the tenths place, I would regroup those for a 1 and I would add a 1 in the ones place. Okay, I can't have more than 10 tenths. That would be too many in one place value. Again, we have learned to say decimals and look at these pictures in multiple ways. So I can see this as 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 10, like a fraction. I would write it as a decimal as 4/10, or I can write it in word form as 4/10. Make sure that when you're talking about decimals, you add that THS. If you write 4/10, then that means 40. If you write 4/10, then that means 4/10 like that. So make sure that you are writing it the correct way. Okay, next up, I'm going to skip some of these. We have number lines. Again, if I want to add 7/10, I know that 7/10 has 0 and 7/10. So I know that it's not going to be past 1. So it can't be over here because these are over 1 whole, and this doesn't have a 1 yet. So I know that it's on the 7 hop out of 10. So I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, I know that's 5 because that little tick mark's a little longer. 6, 7. That would be 7/10. This one says 1 and 1/10. So I know I'm definitely past the 1, and I'm on the first tenth after the whole. So it's 1 and 1/10. All right, now, next what we're going to do is, again, I'm going to show you this. This was on a workbook page, and a lot of kids got really confused on it because it is a little tricky. First of all, I'm just looking at this number line, and I'm seeing that it goes 0, 2 holes, 4 holes, 6 holes, 8 holes. I'm hoping that we're realizing that they're skip counting by 2. But what happened is a lot of kids went like, oh, 0, 1, 2, 2/10. And then they went 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 tenths. And then they were like, oh, 10/10. But look at 10/10 doesn't equal 2. 10/10 equals 1 whole. So that can't be right. Your skip counting is wrong. So you need to use the clues from the number line. If they're skip counting 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, then it's safe to think that each of these little tick marks is skip counting by 2. So I have 0. So this is 2, 4. So that would be 4/10. 6, 8, 10. 10/10 would be 1 whole. Okay, now I need this one. So this is 1 whole, 1 and 2/10, 1 and 4/10, 1 and 6/10, 1 and 8/10. And then it makes sense because that would be 1 and 10/10. If I have 1 and 10/10, that equals 2 because I have 1. 10/10 is 1, and that equals 2. Okay, so now I figured out that each of these tick marks must be a whole. So that's 0, 1, 2. I can assume that this one is 3, then I have 4. This one has to be 5, 6, and then this one would be 7. So now I can finish. If this is 3, this would be 3 and 2/10, 3 and 4/10, 3 and 6/10, 3 and 6/10. If this one, I know it's 5 because look at 4, 4 and 2/10, 4 and 4/10, 4 and 6/10, 4 and 8/10, 4 and 10/10. If I have 4 holes and 10 out of 10, that would be 5. Then I know that I have 7 right here, and it's on the first hop after 7, but I know that it's really, the hop is skip counting by 2, so I know that's 7 and 2/10. Really make sure that you study that number line before you put down your answers to make sure it's correct. Okay, one other thing is what happens when I have 10 of something in any of the place values. So example, if I have 10 ones, I can't put the number 10 in the ones place. That's too many. Our number system is base 10. So anytime we have 10 of something, we need to regroup. I would take 10 ones and I would put them together and then make one 10. Okay? So I would regroup. 10 ones looks like this. I have 1 10 and 0 ones. Okay? So 10 ones is 10, which is 1 10 and 0 ones. Okay? What if I 10 hundreds? Again, I can't put 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 in the hundreds place. 10 hundreds, because I'm base 10, I have to regroup. So I would regroup these 10 hundreds and I would bump them over a place value and regroup it as 1,000. Okay, so 10 hundreds, think of it. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 700, 800, 900. We don't say 1000, we say 1,000. We would regroup it. Same thing with 10 tens. I can't have 10, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in the tens place. When I count by tens, I go 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I would regroup 10 tens and instead give it 100. So the same thing is for decimals because it's just the way our place value works. If I have 10 tenths over here in my tenths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I can't have 10 tenths. If I want to write 10 tenths, I don't write it like that. That is actually, when we get to hundreds, we would read this as 10 hundredths because this is the tens place and this is the hundredths place. So that is incorrect. If I have 10 tenths, I need to regroup that and make it into one whole. Okay? So again, if I think it as a fraction, if I have 10 out of 10, that means I have all 10 out of 10 things colored, which means the whole thing is colored in. So I would change 10 tenths and I would regroup it, and 10 tenths is one whole. So keep that in mind because we're going to start working with that with our decimals. Okay, so here's what I need you to do. What we're going to start talking about is mixed numbers, which is something we learned in fractions, and how you make that as a decimal. So when I read this as 1 and 6/10, which means I have 1, 1, and then I have 6 of these in the tens place. And remember that decimal stands for the word and. So when I see 1 and 6/10, I write 1 and 6/10. And again, my 1 is in the ones place, my and is the decimal, and my 6 is in the tens place. So we're going to try 1 and 4/10. I would write that as 1 and 4/10 because this is in the tenths place. Okay. Next, 76 and 4/10. I would write 76 and 4/10. If I were going to do improper fractions as decimals, which is something we also learned, it's when I have too many things in the numerator and I need to regroup. So this says 12/10 as a decimal. I can't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 things in my tens place. Once I do, I need to regroup. That's like saying if I have 12 ones, I would regroup 10 of them to be 1 10 and 2 ones. So if I have 12 tenths, I need to take 10 of them, regroup them in the ones place, and then I would have down here 1 whole, and I would have 2 tenths left over. So 12 tenths is 1 and 2 tenths. Another way to think about that is if I have 12 tenths and I have a good understanding of fractions, I can make this into a mixed number and make life a lot easier as well. If I have 12 tenths, I know that I can pull out 1 10 out of 10, which is 1 whole, and I would have 2 out of 10 left over, and then I can just read it, 1 and 2 tenths, 1 and 2 tenths. So there's 2 ways to think about it, as the place value way or as the fraction way, and you should have a good understanding of both because we've done so much background knowledge. So I'm going to write 10 tenths as a decimal. Again, I'm hoping that you realize that if I have 10 out of 10 things, I need to regroup it. And 10 tenths equals 1 whole. So 10 tenths as a decimal would be just 1.0, or you could just write 1, okay? I, going back, would have to regroup those 10 tenths into a whole. What about 13 tenths? Now there's 2 ways to think about it. I can think about it the place value way. My decimal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. I can't have 13 in the tenths place, so I'm going to take 10 of them, and I'm going to regroup them for 1 whole, and I would have 1 and 3 tenths left over. Or I can think about 13/10 the fraction way and realize that if I have 13/10, I can pull 10 out of 10 to make a whole, and I would have 3/10 left over, and this would be 1 and 3/10. I'm hoping that you think about which way works best for you. If I have 19/10, same thing. I can think 19/10. That's too many. I could only have 10 in my tenths place. So if I have 19, I can pull one group of 10 out, and then I would have 9/10 left over. And then I know that 1 and 9/10 is 1 and 9/10. 17/10. If I have 17/10, same thing. That's too many tenths. I can only have 10 things. As soon as I have 10 things, I have to regroup. So I can pull out one group of 10, and then I would have 7 left over, which I know would be 1 and 7/10. They read the same way. All right, this one says 15/10. So if I have 15/10, again, that's too many. I need to pull out a group of 10, so I have one group of 10, and then I would have 5/10 left over. So I think of 15/10 as this, and I can pull out 1 10/10, and I have 5/10 left over, which is how I get 1 and 5/10. This one reads 2 1s and 3/10. Well, the and is definitely the decimal point. So I have 2 1s, that's my ones place, and I have 3/10, that's my tenths place. 2 1s and 3/10, 2 1s and 3/10. Again, this one I could write, this is one whole, and I have 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 out of 10. So this way 1 and 9/10, or 1 and 9/10. And the last one I have one whole colored in, and I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1 and 5/10 colored in. Okay, next up is if you need to practice on Google Classroom, you can go into your Whoop Math, which is decimals, and that will help you get through some of these tenths. And what we're going to do next time is work on hundredths. I'm hoping that this gives you a better understanding of tenths. The last thing before we leave is one thing that I do like to think about regarding tenths is thinking of it as money, because money is also something we have background knowledge on. And so when we write money, if I have $43.76, realistically looking at place value, those are the ones and those are the tens. And I'm hoping that we realize that these are the tenths. And I know we haven't gotten to hundredths, but those are the hundredths. And that when I think of money, this would be like 7 dimes and this would be 6 pennies. And if you think about it, dimes, there are 10 dimes in a dollar, which is why they're tenths, because dimes are worth 10 cents. And there are 100 pennies in a dollar, which is why these are hundredths and why there are 100 pennies. Okay, so we are going to be using our background knowledge of place value, money, and fractions to help us through this chapter. All right, I hope this was helpful. Bye, guys.